exponential way, turning the hustle into something great. It is not just about the strength you hold, but how the inner quick begins to unfold. This is the prospect podcast ground, where the secrets of the field are finally found. Building the athlete from the bone to the soul, taking the vision and reaching the goal.
All right, welcome to the Prospect Podcast. I'm Coach Schumann. As always, I'm here with Coach D. We're excited. We have a fantastic guest today, Coach Mike Weick from Princeton University. He is the assistant head coach there. He's a fantastic coach who's really had like kind of a really fast rise, even though the last 7 years he's been at Princeton and has really done a great job there. Why would you ever want to leave? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. But he really has had a great rise from the time he left the playing world when he played at McDaniel all the way up to today. So he's really had he was a fantastic football player at McDaniel. I mean, he was a two-time All-Centennial League linebacker. He's been coaching with Princeton with Coach Bob Serace for the last 7 years. Slowly moving up. That team's won. I won the Ivy League championship in 2021 with him being the linebacker coach, and he was recruiting coordinator, and he's done a variety of different roles. He's the co-defensive coordinator right now. Top 10 defense, top 10 in sacks, top 3 in rushing defense. Just a fantastic coach who really understands the game, knows how to develop players. And I'd be remiss that he was the McDaniel Athlete of the Year as well. So I wouldn't want to leave that out. So fantastic football player, fantastic coach. And he's been in a variety of places before that. And I'll let him tell kind of his whole journey. But he's at a great institution that's had a tremendous amount of success since Coach Serace has been there and since Coach has been there. So welcome to the podcast, Coach.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was really a no-brainer when Derek reached out a couple weeks ago about having an appearance on here. Yeah, I'm fortunate just to be in a lineup. You look at the lineup of guests you guys have had, it's a trip down memory lane and a reminder of how relationships are in coaching. The fact you've had Bob Serace on here, you've had Casey Goff, who I worked for as an intern at King's College and then worked under him at Salve Regina before I became the DC, and Pat Ruley, who's another great friend. I'm sure I'm missing a few people, but just three great people, and I'm fortunate to be in that lineup. So thank you guys for having me. It's really a thrill.
It's a ton of fun. It really is. Derek, we have an Instagram page now specifically for it. So I'm going to start rolling that out now. We built a website for the page because we had so many guests and Derek's process of reaching out. Like he really would have to kind of, especially guys that didn't know us as well, would say, hey, go over here to the YouTube page, which obviously has all the stuff, but this is a lot cleaner and really easy. So you can just pull up the first page and sort through, and you can go see all the guests and have a good idea what you're getting into, and it has all the episodes. So we've been able to do that. We're trying to continue to grow it. And what we found is really great is talking to great coaches like yourself. Like every single episode, we learn something different. So obviously that means that our consistent viewers probably learn something different. And my guess, it's mostly coaches and we were saying that it's a lot of the guys. Sometimes it's a little bit of preaching to the choir, like the guys who want to be great, or guys that'll be watching it. But it's had a great wide reach, so it's really, really good. Coach, talk a little bit about kind of your whole background from the time you were a player all the way to what got you into coaching and kind of your journey along the way.
Sure. Yeah, I played at McDaniel College, Division III school in Maryland, in the Centennial Conference. I appreciate that. Read off of my resume. Athlete of the Year just meant I could tackle really well. I was a consistent tackler. Will tell you that it took a lot of work in the gym, countless hours of flexibility work just to become about as close to an average athlete as possible. So I'm blushing a little bit, but I'm going to slip you a 20 or Venmo you a 20 after we get off this for the athletic. I think my football brain is far superior than I was when you pop the tape on. I appreciate that part of it. Played at McDaniel, and I think anytime you're a kid, you dream of playing in the National Football League. My dad's a little bit under 6'2.5", and I'm a little over 5'9". So when you have a 5'1" mother, you realize that you're probably not going to make your money playing linebacker in the National Football League. So as I got to McDaniel, I started to think about the years after. I knew I wanted to be a coach. I had some tremendous mentors. It really started with Brad Fordyce, who's the current head coach at Dickinson College, who was my college DC my freshman year and hired me at Susquehanna for my second job. And Mike Daly. Mike is an Arena Football Hall of Famer. Mike came in my senior year and was a godsend to us at McDaniel. We had been struggling as a program. Mike instilled a lot of belief in us. And, there's a guy that coached for the Colorado Crush, worked for John Elway, and I got a chance and the privilege to play for Mike and have him in my life as, one of my biggest mentors. Coach Daly showed me, no matter what the level was, bringing passion and developing people, that football was the best avenue in order for me to do that. So really about midway through student teaching of my senior year at McDaniel, I knew that I didn't want to do that. I think the teaching profession is an amazing one. I didn't want to go the high school route. I really wanted to deep dive right into coaching. I knew it wasn't going to pay well. I knew it was going to be a lot of long hours. Unfortunately, Jeff Nahr got hired at King's College, hired me to be the linebackers coach, the defensive intern, the video guy, probably did some laundry, right? You do everything you possibly can just to get in the door for a wonderful $3,000 stipend with a place to sleep and a meal plan in the King's cafeteria. So, I'm all excited. I go interview in Wilkes-Barre. It's about April. I call my mom and dad, say, hey, got the job. They offered me on the spot. Mom goes, what's the salary? I said, $3,000. I heard a little gasp on the other side of the phone, but to my parents' credit, they didn't even bat an eyelash. They're fully supportive. And they said, if you're going to do this, go all in and go make it happen for yourself. So I got a chance to work at King's College. We went 1-9. And I tell people all the time that was probably the greatest experience I could have ever had. And nobody gets into coaching and goes, I want to win one game. We beat FDU in week 9. So we waited until November to finally win a game. And the things I learned and just kind of the grit aspect that you have to go through when you're doing all the grunt work, the video work, you're putting in about 80 to 85 hours a week and you have no money at the end of the day. But it really taught me that I love this, that I love the people. We were a brand new coaching staff. It was a first time ever head coach in Jeff Nahr. It was a first time ever defensive coordinator in Casey Goff. So those experiences for me, when I look back on that 15 years ago, were more than I could have ever quantified at that point in time. From there, I then got an opportunity to go reunite with Brad Fordyce at Susquehanna University, where I got a chance to be the linebackers coach and the strength and conditioning coordinator. So I have an exercise science background. So for me, that was something that was pretty exciting to work hand in hand with the players. The cool part about that, our starting left tackle on that Susquehanna team in 2011 is Brandon Cuevas, who is our current offensive line coach and just became our recruiting coordinator for us at Princeton. And our backup quarterback was Mark Rosenbaum, who's our offensive coordinator at Princeton. So now I work with those guys. I've been with Mark for 7 years. Brandon joined us about a year and a half after I got there. So we're all together, and that was a great experience. Then in 2012, I got the opportunity to become a special teams coordinator and hired by Bob Chesney, who's now the head football coach at UCLA. And when Bob went on to Assumption College, I stayed with Kevin Gilmartin, who was our OC and became the head coach. And that was an opportunity for me to climb at Salve over a 5-year span. You talk about, I love the Jersey Shore. Newport, Rhode Island might be my only place that I'm more excited to be at. There's just a wow factor to that town.
Yep. It's an unbelievable place.
Yeah. And Kevin gave me my first full-time job. So I'm really indebted to Kevin Gilmartin. I just saw him over the weekend, got a chance to catch up, and he's an amazing coach. And then from there, I've replaced Brad Fordyce at Bucknell University, which was my first Division I opportunity, working for Joe Susan, who had been at Princeton and is best friends with Steve Verbit, who has been at Princeton for 41 years. As we kind of went through some changeover at Bucknell, the opportunity to get on as the linebackers coach at Princeton showed up for me in 2019, where I've now been there 7 years and have been able to climb up the ranks in our own room, right? So I think anytime you get an opportunity to get new roles and new responsibilities, that's an amazing thing when you don't have to move. And I'm forever Bob Serace's debt, because you talk about working for the right type of person. You said earlier, Dave, there's no better place to be. I coach at the #1 school in the country. I coach incredible athletes. We have an unbelievable national outreach with ridiculous alumni that fund the program and support us in so many special ways. And, for a guy that comes from a small college that I have to really introduce, to be at a school where if I wear the logo anywhere in the country, I'm going to get pulled into a conversation. There's a wow factor to that for me. There's an unbelievable gratitude about that for me. And just being around the best people in the world and the best student athletes in the world is something I take great pride in. So it's been a fun journey. And hopefully I'm excited to do this for another 35 or 40 years. I don't know if I'll get to Steve Verbitt's level and still doing this at 71 years old, but I'd like to give him a round.
It's awesome. Your enthusiasm is infectious. It's yeah, I guess the podcast is just end. You know, you coach at Princeton, the podcast over.
Yeah, just drop it right there.
There you go.
Yeah. If you want to know where you want to go in coaching your life, there you go. And that's it. That's the end of the podcast. No, it's really it's an awesome place. Yeah, every time I hear the word Newport, I back when you were at Salvi, I always think of the ABC Beach Club there, and how much trouble I can get into there that back in the day, you know. So the Newport, what a place! Oh my God, like it when you go there, you're like, is this actually like a real place? My goodness gracious, it's unbelievable. Talk about so it's really interesting. Your journey's really interesting. You know, like one of the things that I've noticed in the journey of a lot of the coaches, right? Like where they played at has very little to dictate like where they can climb to. And obviously you were, a player. So, but we also talked to a lot of guys that like went into coaching right away, that like were, played like 1 year and then they're like, you know what, I want to coach. And I think the fact that coaching has really become a profession in the last, I would say 15 years, guys can, when you came out of college, that was really, I think, the beginnings where not just the head coach and the coordinators were making really good money and maybe a high level position coach. Guys down the ladder could really start to have a career and have that opportunity and have the opportunity to rise. Did you, when you started coaching, did you say, hey, this is where I'm hoping to go? Or were you really like, okay, I just want to coach one day at a time? How was your approach when you went right from playing to coaching?
Yeah, my original dream was to be the head football coach at McDaniel College. And I'm not shy when I say that. I think as you go through the profession and you get exposed to more things, your dreams can change. And it's not that I'm saying my dreams are bigger or anything like that. I think what the guys do at the Division III level is really special. I think I'm so fortunate that I cut my teeth there as a player and as a coach. Right? I spent 11 years of my life between coaching and playing, at the small college level, and you really find the passion and love for it. I think just as I kind of continued to build genuine relationships, I'm just the type of guy that kept showing up. That's probably the 5'9" linebacker mentality in me of, if I got a chance to talk football, then it was get into the Patriot League, right? So when I was 24, I remember sitting in the office at Bucknell going, wow, this is amazing. And maybe one day I can do this. And then when I was 29, I got hired at Bucknell. And then you see Princeton in the Ivy League, and then you look at really kind of the combination of the quality of life aspect and what you're doing for the players off the field. Can I get into that building? You work the Princeton football camp. You work the Bucknell football camp. You go to as many places as you possibly can. You go to the Rutgers football camp. You go to TCU. You go to all these places. And I think you start to find your niche. I think to me, the number one thing is the authenticity, right? Be authentically you and be unapologetic about it and be as good to as many people along the way. And the fortunate thing for me, also, I think when I got to Salve Regina and I saw Coach Chesney get to Division II as a guy that was a long-time Division III person that had worked in these different roles, that opens your eyes to, I can do this too. And I think just having some of the right inspirations, or that I played for Mike Daly, who was Arena Football Hall of Famer, but treated McDaniel College like it was Alabama for us. And I think those aspects inspire you. And then you get encouraged because you look around and you say, well, I can make this happen. Now, everybody's route is a little bit different. I'm certainly not from a blue blood school. I didn't go to an Ivy League institution, but you start to learn that you can make it when you get into the room. If you just study things, you're honest with yourself, and you're willing to put the time and the effort in. It took me a long time. And I think for me, It's one of those deals where you look at your friends, they get married a little bit younger, they buy a house way before you can buy a house. And you just have to understand that your idea of goals and dreams and your lifestyle aren't the exterior, the material things that are exterior. It's every day I get to wake up and do something I absolutely love. And I just happen to now be at an incredibly recognizable brand. So I think for me, that was really important. And the steps along the way have helped me value that. And it's really a thing I wake up every day with tremendous gratitude. And that helps me. It helps you get through the tough days. Helps you when you have a 3-7 season like we had. There's gratitude to be in the building and make it right and go ask for answers. And I think the last thing on that is there's a humility to it as well. Every day I walk into the office at Princeton, or John Mack, our athletic director, who's become a great person, friendship, relationships, who has a Princeton background. Bob Surace has a Princeton background. Well, I learned the place because I'm so excited to be there. And yeah, I didn't go to school there, but I tell them I'm 1 year away from my doctorate at Princeton, right? We don't offer that, but it's for me to say, you value that aspect of it and you learn the place. And that's something I think you learn to be a bit of a chameleon in the profession. And then your skill sets are there and you try to make yourself really irreplaceable because you're willing to do a million different things. So that part's been really, really fun for me, Dave and Derek, and that part of the journey.
I think too that like one of the things too about being, a career coach at the level that you have is, I heard a guy say once, like, and we talked about it a little bit, with, you got into originally we were student teaching, and, most guys take that route and they just kind of get into coaching because they're teaching and they still have a passion for the sport. Right. And I heard a guy, somebody said to me real early, when I was young in my career, with that teaching, coaching aspect, it was like, hey, just stay broke as long as you can, right? Because if once you get into that full-time job teaching, you kind of get pigeonholed into, the mold of how, quote, life is supposed to be, right? You get a job, you start to settle down, you find a girl, you have a family, right? And then before you know it, like those dreams and aspirations of, being that high level college coach or making it to the NFL as a coach, whatever that is, kind of get, it's almost impossible because now you've set yourself up where you need that constant paycheck. And that's, you can't make it work the way you have because you have to come up through those ranks. You have to take that job that pays no money and you're sleeping on a cot or you're in a house with 7 other coaches in the school. And, that I think is extremely difficult for guys unless you're extremely driven and passionate about where you want to go and what you want to do, because all of your friends around you are starting their careers. Like you said, they're buying houses, they're getting married, they're having kids. And here you are still kind of running around, or you're jumping from school to school to school, and because you're trying to make your way up and find your niche. It takes a lot to really kind of hammer down. And, you have to have that support system. And for you, I know you mentioned your parents as the support, and they were very, they backed you in what you were doing. How crucial is that to have that support system in going through that when sometimes, everything around you seems like it's working out for everybody else, yet you're kind of still going through that struggle, right? But knowing there's light at the end of the tunnel, but others don't see it. So what was that support? How was that for you? Where did you find that?
Yeah, there's inevitable in your coaching career. That light at the end of the tunnel is a freight train. The Metallica song right there. It's coming your way. And do you have people behind you when you inevitably get hit by that freight train, whether it's financially, spiritually, typically both at the same time? As
literally,
literally that hits you head on. My mom and dad have been absolutely incredible in that support. I'm just very fortunate. There's plenty of coaches that have come from all types of backgrounds. I just know my mom and dad comes from a row home in Port Richmond. He's one of 10 kids. He's the 9th of 10. My mom's the 6th of 7 from Rawhurst in Northeast Philly. So there's just that, kind of that Philly tough aspect where they had to grow up in a home where they weren't the center of attention all the time because they had a lot of other siblings. So I think my dad was really a main inspiration for me. My father was a writer for the Philadelphia Daily News up until he was in his late 20s.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, my parents had me at age 28. And I remember, my dad tells me these stories more now as, I'm in my late 30s and you're going into your career. And my dad was covering high school football games on Friday nights and Saturdays for like $20 a game, $15 a game, back in like 1988. And I remember he tells me sort of the time he stepped away from it because he took like you said, Derek, the comfortable. This is what life's supposed to be job. Mom works in healthcare as a respiratory therapist, and mom was the breadwinner, right? So, I mean, I think that was hard for dad too. So you hear those type of stories as they're trying to make it happen, and dad was still chasing the dream. And I don't think there's a ton of regret, but he took a step back to have a child, and they had my brother Dan, and then they had my brother Kevin. So all of a sudden you wake up one day and you have 3 kids, and you're trying to do things the right way. My dad has never let me waver, even on the hard times where, you're in that 3rd year or the 4th year, or even really it was like year 7 or year 8, and you're struggling to get over $40,000 on your yearly contract. You're making a first year teacher salary,
No
and
doubt.
now you're 30, right? And the world doesn't look at you the same as when you're 23. So I think my dad, his passion for sports, and then him being an amazing writer, but walking away from that full time, was really the motivator for me that I'm going to make it. Not only am I going to make it for myself, I'm going to make it for my dad, because I get to live this dream of sports being a profession for me. And my dad didn't get to do that. And a lot of that was because he made those sacrifices when they had me, in his late 20s. So I think there's a driving force in that. And you need to have people behind you to remind you, because if you say you're always feeling good, or man, you have this job, right? They always say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That's complete crap. Like, I work every day of my life because I love it and I'm driven by it. I want to maintain it, and I want to continue to exceed the level. So I think there's that inspiration, right? I kind of try to live my life by, my greatest fear in life is letting someone down who believes in me. And when you're lazy, it's disrespectful to those people that believe in you.
Mhm.
And the strength of my parents is huge. And also the coaches, right? I think the people I've worked for along the way have been really great. I didn't have an amazing high school football experience. I had a far superior college football experience, and I've had a far superior than that college coaching experience. So I think I just rely on those group of mentors. But my parents are 100% the main source of why I'm still doing this going on year 16.
No doubt about it. That's really inspirational. I mean, it is one of those things that, like, you need, in order to succeed in coaching, you need to be able to have that, the opportunity to be able to take those chances and take the time necessary to go through the really, really hard part of it in order to be successful. And it's a great analogy with what, your father experienced, when you have a family, all of a sudden, obviously you have responsibility. So he's a hero from that standpoint, because a lot of, to be able to give up in that instance, to sacrifice so you can have that opportunity. And then knowing the knowledge he has from his experiences, to be able to say, hey, listen, you need to go for this. You know what I mean? Like, you have the support to be able to go for it. It wasn't in his cards, but he's able to transfer that to you. You know what I mean? And you have the same exact, obviously, go-getterness to be able to do that. But now you also have the opportunity with it, and the ability to have, a father that's a leader, to be able to say, hey, listen, you need to go for that. You need to go for that opportunity and that dream. That's awesome. I mean, it's amazing. We talk a lot about, like, good parenting and stuff like that. Like, that's great parenting. I mean, both obviously have great parents as a whole, but I mean, from a father standpoint, to me, that's great leadership. He's able to give his son the opportunity, right, to be able to do the things that he needs to do. So it's really, really cool, and I think that'll obviously always stay with you in everything that you do. It's that service mentality, and it probably translates to how you serve the athletes that you work with that same exact mentality. We talk a lot about parenting, and it kind of brings me to an interesting question, because when you guys are recruiting, and you've been at all the different levels, does parenting or parents that you meet have an impact at when you decide to recruit an athlete or not? And if it does have an impact, what are some of the factors that you weigh with taking in a player, when you are meeting their parents and you going through that process?
Sure. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and there's cliches for a reason. And I think that if you're not digging in on the parents, the background, the high school environment, you're not doing your due diligence. And that doesn't mean that there's this cut and dry cookie cutter blueprint for success. But I do think you need to dig in, and relationships are everything in life. And the people that you have relationships typically shape how you're going to react when things inevitably get hard, adversity hits and strikes. We work extensively at Princeton, especially to get to know parents. Now, we're a non scholarship football program. We are really funded as far as the financial aid side of things. But digging in, number one, for us, knowing occupations and knowing where the background's going to be is the first initial piece. Is this going to be an affordable aspect for a family? So I think that's something, that we have to understand in the Ivy League model, which is a phenomenal model. It's kind of the last beacon of student athlete at the Division I level. So getting to know the parents more on the side of when the young man comes into our program, that's critical. It's a critical component because the whispers at home, they tend to show up, right? When it's really hard and you're in any level of college football,
Oh yeah.
there is going to be a period of development where it's really hard, or a period of Coach Weick is really hard on me. Coach Weick is a jerk in this moment. And I think the bonds that you build with the families and the kids, that ensures that she didn't say nothing is ever ensures it, but that solidifies the type of development piece that you can have. I think one of the main things I always try to talk about my coaching philosophy, we want to attack problems on the field, not people. And the type of background that a kid comes from, if he came from a home where his parents attacked problems at home, he's going to be more likely to have a little bit more grit in his DNA. He's going to be able to overcome some things when it's inevitably not cookie cutter. I think we have a world sometimes where we don't even have helicopter parents anymore. We have snowplow parents, and they pave the way. And I think it's really important to get a feel for that. And that doesn't mean you don't take a player, but you need to understand when Johnny's mom has paved everything away and he transferred 3 times and it was always the coach's fault. There's probably going to be some issues. It's going to be my fault at some point, and he may enter the portal or go through those things. So I think even more so now, we've created a structure in college football. Let's call it what it is. I'm a blunt guy. We've given people cop-outs, and it's not 100% that way. I think there's the portal has some things. A kid's in a bad situation, a coach brings someone in. Sure, I'm all about player development and players having great benefits, but let's work through some things. Football was designed for you to go through hard things and shape a generation of men that go on that can overcome harder things when you hit the real world. Football shapes that piece of it. And I think as we dig into the parents, long-winded answers on this, but when you dig into the parents, you tend to see what type of ability a young man's going to have to be able to overcome adversity. And when you come to a place like Princeton, it's freaking hard. School is hard. The hours that you spend outside the classroom are hard. Playing Division I football is hard. Time management is hard. So I think we really need to dig in on those pieces, and we do a really nice job of that. It's not perfect. But I do think if you don't dig into the parents, you don't know where the young man's coming from. And it also helps me as an educator. Every student learns a little bit differently. I think that's one of the things that carries me from student teaching. But as a coach, does this player learn from me drawing on the board? Does he learn from video? Does he learn from a combination of that? Does he learn from scout cards and visualizing that? So I think when you know what type of background they come from, it helps me accelerate their learning curve as well.
No doubt about it. I mean, because we're in the 7-on-7 world, we see a lot of this stuff from a negative standpoint. We run events and we have a club, and we've been lucky, obviously, because of the kind of the way that we are, that we probably attract mostly the people that we would want in the club with the kind of right thought process. But we see it all the time where, like, we'll see great athletes and we'll be like, he's going to have a hard time, because he just doesn't understand how to conduct himself, and then you turn around and, sometimes the guy who's coaching him in like this or I don't know, whatever they're involved in, also has the wrong approach. And that's there's a big part. And we talk about this a lot with because Instagram is like, we call it we see both sides of it. I understand as a trainer and you have a business, like you got to post stuff like I get a client. I get all that. I understand that. I have a business. I do the same thing too. But I think there's a lack of education for some parents as to like, who do you want your kids to be around? And that's a big thing. Like you have to, I think parents have to really take a good grasp of who they want their kids to be around, because, and it's athlete wise, yes, but really, when you're getting coached up, training wise, like what groups do you want to be around? And I think it's a big part, because we're so caught in the desire to win at all costs that we forget about the development of the individual, right? And I'm not even just talking about skills. I'm talking about the development of the individual, right? Like who is talking around them, how are they behaving? Everybody gets excited. Obviously, every coach is to get excited. I'm not. That's not the issue. The issue is, language they use on a regular basis. What they value, how they carry themselves. Like I say this all the time. Like I go to events. I mean, good golly, well, I just walked to my car and got high. I mean, it's crazy. It's true. Okay, it's true. And I'm not judging. People can do whatever they want with their own lives. It's not my space to judge it. My thing is, you got kids and you influence kids, right? And so I don't care what you want to do, whatever you want to do in your own time, you do that. But when you're influencing kids, clean it up to influence kids to the right way. And then I think parents have a hard time. Like they'll say, well, that guy's really great at this, right? Well, who cares if he doesn't conduct himself the right way? You know what I mean? Like you could find another guy that's conducts himself the right way that does that really well, So I would love for you, because you're at Princeton, and obviously the kids that you coach, for the most part, I'm sure every once in a while you have a kid that messes up, but for the most part, you're going to have a group of kids that you're coaching that are there to work, there to do things the right way. A lot of times have been, most of the time been raised the right way. What is it that you found that parents do really well there with the kids that you have that you get the coach?
Yeah, I think it's the priorities. You can't play for us unless roughly you're at least a 3.7 unweighted GPA or better with 5 to 8 AP classes or dual enrollment classes. So I'd say pretty consistently, and it's regardless of the socioeconomic background, it's regardless of public school versus private school. I think one of the things, and even I joke all the time, when I came for my interview, I thought I needed a smoking jacket to know which
yeah.
me.
Pinky up,
Bob
a top hat.
He's got like a Belichick style cutoff hoodie with a camo hat. And I was like, all right, he's a Millville, New Jersey guy. I can work with these people, right? You don't lose your grit. You don't lose that type of DNA that you have. But I think the common
but there is not to cut you off, Coach, but that is like, you know what I mean? And I want you to continue, but that is like when you hear Princeton or just Ivy League in general, everybody has this picture in their brain of exactly what you just said. It's a higher etiquette, a above everybody else type of formal, you know what I mean, 3-piece suit type of, mentality that irregardless of sport, like this is what Princeton is, and this is how it needs to be. And you know what I mean? Like that's just the look. That's just like what people think about it. It just kind of, it's embedded into, anybody that's, has any inkling of, or a thought of when they think of the Ivy League, it's across the board, regardless whether it's Princeton or another school.
And it couldn't be any further from the truth. I mean, other than we have some great stakes at alumni events, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't be around some great people that have been insanely. I'm around the most successful people in the world at every event. Right. It's incredible, but it's such a common misconception. The common thing, kind of with Dave's question on it, it's excellence. It's people that strive to be elite in everything that they do, whether it's their academics, whether it's the way they public speak, whether it's the way that they write, the type of literature that they read. I think it's just excellent. And you don't have to be of someone who looks like the Winklevoss twins from Social Network movie, the Harvard rowers that are 6'4", right? And I'll dig at
Right.
the boys North all the time, right? They're a great program, and I like to smile. But it's not this smoking pipe, smoking jacket environment.
Right.
It's a group of individuals who come from really all over the world, but from a football perspective, most of our guys are American. But our guys right now are from 34 different states. Every single one of them has a different accent, has a different skin tone, has a different socioeconomic background. There's this giant melting pot with the core aspect of it is excellence. And I think, to me, when you look at the parents that our players come from, regardless of the background, they've instilled a work ethic and an element of aptitude that comes from hard work. And now we're not perfect. I mean, I have
Right.
I deal with Ivy League problems is kind of one of the things we smile about. Our players are not perfect. They're still 18 to 22. They're still 16 and 17 in the recruiting process. But I do think the common denominator is a commitment to excellence. You choose your hard in life. John Mack, our athletic director, says that all the time. And our players, the hard that they choose is not poor habits like Dave, you said kind of in the parking lot. Our players choose their hard of late nights getting a 50-page paper prepared, or if they're an engineer or an architect, the type of things that they're going to do, along with having multiple hours of football, training, studying the game. They just find that balance piece. So I think that's something that our parents and just kind of the environment that our players come, which is why, I have such a great job, right? I get a chance to be at this high level of football, but off the field, you have to choose your hard, and the hard our players choose are their academics and their football preparation over a very distant third, social life or getting caught up in the wrong things. They certainly have their fun. They're real people. Like you said, Derek, it's not a group of robots here or, this high society, but they choose their hard in the right way.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's well worth it to have that approach. Like when you think about cutting corners, or you excuse this, you excuse that,
Right.
then
Excuses.
then you start to get in. And I think parents do have a very, very, very large influence in that, because you're right. You said it earlier, like people either either they coach it or they allow it, right? And so as a parent, it's, and I've said this many times, it's one time you say something that kids don't listen to that. Like, you need to do it. It has to be hundreds of times. They're going to make that mistake. They're going to make that mistake dozens and dozens of times, right? And then all of a sudden, if you keep reinforcing it, then it clicks, and they go, okay, you know what? Like, this, if I want to be better, these are things I got to do. And everybody's on a different timetable, but when kids are able to do that, it makes a huge difference. And then they have a chance to be players that could be down the line, maybe a Princeton athlete. And obviously you've been in places that maybe from an academic standpoint, it wasn't, obviously the level of Princeton. So you have a different variety of academic situations. So it's at different places you've been at. So there are different kind of things, but it's when you want to go and say, okay, what do you expect? This is what Princeton expects. With the transfer portal and NIL. By the way, I've said this before. Derek's heard me say this. I always say this: if anybody like all these groups have their endowments, I said, if the Ivy League just ever turned around and said, especially Princeton, Harvard, Yale, if they turn around and said, we want to be the very best football team in the whole entire nation, it would take all but 30 seconds for that to happen. But obviously it differs from what their actual, what their goals are at the university. But it's interesting with the transfer portal, because you brought it up. And I think that there's so much stuff going on where now they had the group down in DC that the president talked with, and they're trying to figure out what are they going to do there between NIL and transfer portal. Are they going to do anything? Has that affected anything that you guys have had to deal with or done at Princeton? I'm always curious of that, because there are some, like, when we talk to like Johns Hopkins at the D3 level, there's some effect, but not a large amount of effect for them. You know what I mean? And D3 is different. It is a lower level. And when you're at D3 level, you know, to me, if you're playing at D3 level, if you're not going to a high academic school, you know, unless that isn't an opportunity for you, if you can go to high school, why wouldn't you? Right? You know what I mean? Because you're playing Division III football. If you're good enough to go to a Johns Hopkins, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, or any school like that. Obviously, if your academic situation is different case. But talk a little bit about, do you deal with any, like, I'm always curious about that with the Ivy League.
Yeah, we've had one transfer at Princeton since 1985. Jason Garrett, we always kind of laugh, like he's the original transfer portal guy when we talk, because his father became head coach of Columbia for 1 year, and then he came back. So there's, Red Bank and those guys in that area, they're, a little bit Seagirt, that type of connection. So Jersey Shore, like you guys, and with your ties. But for us, we took one transfer during COVID, who was a young man, came in from the University of Colorado. They had a coaching staff change, and Bob Surace will never take a quarterback without seeing him throw live. Well, obviously during COVID, you couldn't go see people throw live. We had seen Blake Stenstrom throw previously, and we took Blake, and he also had a 3.9 GPA. He had checked all these markers, an entire family that went to Stanford. He is the only transfer that we've taken during the entire transfer portal aspect. Some of our opponents are a little bit different, but we use that as an enhancement to our recruiting strategy. If you come to Princeton and you're a high school football player and you get one of our 27, what I call orange tickets, right? Willy Wonka gives the golden ticket. I get to give the orange ticket. You're going to be a guy that we develop. We're devoted to you for your entire time here. As far as us having a 99% graduation rate in our program, right? So that's something that really enhances us. I think from a recruiting end of it, it also has clarified things. I think you used to see every once in a while, we'd probably have one to maybe two guys a year that were a true Power 4 player that just chose Princeton for whatever reason. But because they'll receive a couple $100,000 in NIL money and the amount of money that can happen, I think that guy's kind of gone from us now. But it's allowed us to really kind of major in group of 5 level players. And that's something that battle now, because if you go, and I'm not throwing shade or any of them, it's the reality of the business now. If you end up at a group of 5 and you're a top tier player, it's almost a minor league system to try to jump up to the next level.
No doubt.
Or you're the guy to your left and the guy to your right. If you end up being the one that stays, which is great, they're
going somewhere else.
Yeah. So you're most of your locker room turns over. So I think for us, it's really just enhanced our recruiting, because we can really sit in a parent's living room or to the player. The players don't even understand it right away. I think it's mom and dad get it first. And that's the importance of the relationship with the parents in recruiting. But you come to Princeton, you are going to play for us for 4 years. If I take 2 or 3 linebackers, you're the 3 guys that I have, and I have to develop you. If you don't develop, I'm not going to get a kid who's unhappy at Rutgers or Penn State to transfer in and play for me. So the recruitment, the development side of it, we're still pure Division I football as it was established many years ago. And I think that part for us, it's clarified that. As far as the NIL money and things like that those are conversations above my pay grade with those type of things. But I think at the end of the day, the universities are always going to still want the student part to be first and the athlete part to be a close second. So for us, it's more, I think it's just giving us more clarity in how we attack recruiting those 27 spots. It's definitely also accelerated recruiting. When I first got into the league, the guys that you have to commit to the admissions process here. So our admissions works hand in hand with us and the parameters that we need to be able to do. And we have great relationships and our liaisons and things like that. But it has now cleared those pictures up, and you have to make decisions a lot faster. So I think it's expedited that piece of it. Everything's kind of bumped up a cycle. So when you go on the road in January, what used to be home visits to seal the deal for that year's class, you're really mainly all the way on to the next year's class. So like this past January, for example, I was really all 2027 recruiting outside of seeing a commit or two if I happen to be in their town. When I go out on the road spring recruiting, we really need to be ready to make decisions on a lot of kids in that element of it. And by the time you hit our June camps, you have to showcase it. You're not really getting a lot of time through your senior year. It's really by the time you hit those June camps, July camps, that's kind of your make or break time. Not saying that there's not a few outliers here or there. We certainly will take a couple guys if they're left over, but going from when I first got in the league, December, you probably had 15 spots left, and you were close on some guys. Now it could be 1 to 3 spots left, period, across the board. So I think that part has been the biggest effect, is the clarification of the targets and then the expedited process of it.
Right, which now for you as an assistant coach, like now you have to really ramp up your game and understand that, look, like I don't have this wiggle room where I can, okay, I'll check that guy out, later on. You have to really look at the targets, what you guys are looking to bring in. Just, I think it also helps you with the stability of your roster and guys not transferring out or leaving for this or doing all that kind of stuff, where a lot of the other schools, not within the Ivy League, but outside of it, are dealing with that, right? Because they may have certain target recruiting, players based off of, what they do it off their roster, right? And now all of a sudden, this guy's leaving, that guy's leaving, well, now maybe you have to shift your targets because I just lost 3 linebackers, or this guy left for this place, or that guy's off on that place. And that's where I think the relationship aspect of coaching comes into it. And it needs, like, you need to understand and know your room inside and out. And I think at Princeton or an Ivy League, I think that can happen even more so because those guys are more invested in staying at school. Because even, look, if it's not, everybody has dreams and aspirations of NFL and whatnot, like that's not the end all be all. They know they're going to make that NIL check when they graduate based off of their job. And I think that in itself changes the entire recruiting game and the locker room makeup for an Ivy League, because they have that stability where these guys aren't chasing initial, like, upfront money, right? Because I mean, look, we talk a couple grand, right, to a college kid is, oh wow, like, you know what I mean? Like Dave and I talk about it all the time, like when you used to get your Pell Grant money, right, or whatever you got, like guys are like, I'm loaded, and you're like, really? Like these guys now understand that they may not get that money if they wait or don't go and transfer and take it somewhere else. Whereas at an Ivy League or Princeton, they know eventually what I'm going to do once I graduate and have this piece of paper as a graduate of this joint. Like, buddy, we're good. I'm sitting pretty. And I think the family component adds to that as well, because like you said, the kid themselves or the student athlete themselves, they may want to go run and take that money, right, initially, because wow, or the parents may not be in a financial situation, or just might not have that philosophy of, no, you're there for your degree, it's going to help you, right, and we can float you until then, or whatever that is. I think that stability within the parent aspect now can kind of, hey, you're not doing that. You're not leaving. You're staying. You're going to work, get developed, and then look, you'll make it on the back end. They don't need it, right? Like the family doesn't need that. Whereas some other places, or with some kids, like that might be the most money they'll ever make in their life, no matter what. And the parents sure as hell may not have ever seen anything like that. So it's just a different mindset, I think, when you're talking Ivy League. I want to stay on the world of recruiting and whatnot. I think, and touch on this a little bit, like Ivy League is a national recruiting base, no matter what school you're at, right? For the most part. How has that, right? Now we see, look, a lot of the older, like when, recruiting back in the day, it was a lot of geographical location, right? Like it was kind of, hey, you're in the Big Ten. These are the guys that play in the Big Ten, right? Now you see the Big Ten, like you got Oregon, you got USC, West Coast teams are in it. So you see almost every team now that are in these big time conferences have a national recruiting base, right? And I think social media adds to that, right? There's more access. Everybody's seeing things across the nation, all those kinds of things. How has that at Princeton, coming from where you guys have always been a national type of school, where you look at your roster, like you said, 38 states, right? Is that what you, like, you know what I mean? Like on the roster itself, like that are there. How has that kind of aided and helped that you had been there and now just kind of continues to push it with that national, recruiting world?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily the change in landscape, like the Big Ten becoming a coast-to-coast brand. I don't think that's really affected us much, Derek, to be honest with you. I think for us, the it's just we understand national recruiting because we major in it. It's always
Right.
just been a point of emphasis for us. Now,
It's why I thought like Notre Dame has the leg up, right? Because they've
Yeah.
always kind of been a
Yeah.
national recruiting base. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not a Texas or you know what I mean? Like some of those schools that really made a niche. I like the first one off my head for like how I grew up or where I was like Nebraska, right? Like they would always just have a Nebraska kid, right? And that
Sure.
was kind of how they made their mark, right? But even like our the power four in our state, Rutgers, right? Like you look at them, like they got guys from all over, or they had their niches in certain areas, right? Like when Greg first got there, he really hammered home Florida. But why? Because he had coached in Florida and he kind of knew a little bit of that landscape. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's different. You know what I mean? But I just know like the Ivy League has always had that presence. Like, you know what I mean? Like speak to that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I think we almost have to go the opposite way because we're so good. Oh, there we go. We, for us, have to just make sure we take care of our own backyard. I think that's something that you almost have to go the opposite way because we're going to be national, right? From any given year, I've been here. We've had 5 guys from Texas in the recruiting class. The next year, you take 1. We've had 6 guys from California. The next year, you take 0. But it's really critically important when we have the conversations that we take care of our backyard as well. We're going to recruit Philadelphia and New Jersey and Maryland, the DMV, the New England prep schools. Like we have a big presence in that aspect. So I think it's almost for us the opposite mentality. If you have to remind yourself the local side of things are just as good because they are, right? But Texas and California, those states are amazing. Florida has been an amazing place for us. So I think you also know your niche. The other thing for us is academics. So when you look at how we will kind of portray where we're going to attack and invest our time and our bandwidth, it has to be schools that are going to have their students prepared to make it at Princeton. So I think that's another element for our recruiting that's unique, as far as that. So you have your national places. I think today too, Dave, you were hitting on earlier about all the social media. Everybody has Instagram, Twitter, you have, Facebook, insert whatever you want, TikTok. And there's only so much bandwidth you have as a coach, and you can only build relationships with so many people. I can send an email, or we all have personnel people now. But as we go through and really invest our time, it has to be in places that we feel there's a return on investment. So we certainly have our pockets. You do want to scour everything. You want to make sure that you don't want to leave any stone unturned. But I do think that we've always majored in the national recruiting and really have perfected that side of it. I think it's really just channeling that piece of it. And there's a lot of white noise. So you can only speak and have Zoom calls with so many families. I can only have so many phone conversations throughout the day and also still take care of my own players. So recruiting has really become a lot of the job. I sometimes I joke that I'm 90% recruiter, 10% coach, and that's what we live in.
doubt.
You want to be 50-50, right? You want to be even 70-30 the other way. And you just have to control your bandwidth because you have to invest and pour into your own players, the player development, but also ensure that the roster is stocked full of talent. So I do think that your niches. Like when I'm in the state of Texas, there are certain schools I will go to all the time. There's other schools that it may be once every couple of years just based on the clientele, the level of football. But really, it's also the academics. Will they be able to produce a player that will have enough courses and structure that I can then yield to come play for us? And also make sure that they're going to be successful. The worst thing you can do is bring a young man into a situation where he's not prepared for it. So I think we do a pretty good job of vetting that side of it, regardless of if they're from Nebraska, Florida, or right in our backyard in New Jersey.
Right, but that's also extremely important within recruiting itself, right? And a lot of guys don't talk about that aspect of like the high school that you're recruiting. Look, you're recruiting the player, yes, but they also have to be in a situation to be able to be successful off the field within that school setting. And a lot of high schools don't do the justice that it needs to be. As a high school coach, right? Like we can only tell our guys so much of like, this is what it's going to be. This is how it's going to be. And then it's up to you to figure it out. Well, you don't want to put them in a situation that they're going to immediately struggle just because the school aspect that they've gone through for the last 4 years hasn't set them up to be successful in those situations in regards to, the classes that they're taking or the structure of the school itself, or just the overall academic skills that they're being given at the high school level to now go to college and be successful. You can have study hall and all that and tutors and whatever, but do you really want a guy? Are you going to bring in a guy who's a really good player, but is now going to struggle academically because he hasn't been, like taught a certain way or learned certain things, off the field? Because how good is that player really going to be when he's struggling in the classroom? And that's irregardless of the grades he's actually getting or just the overall confidence that now is going to take away from everything and who he is as a person. So I think the due diligence to do your homework on that, like Princeton is ahead because you guys go to different states and you see certain academic systems or, just how sports are treated in different states set up. We talked to a ton of coaches throughout the country itself, right? And, when you talk to guys from Texas or, systems and high schools that have, sports built into the school day, right? In terms of that aspect in comparison to like here in New Jersey, where that's not a thing, right? Like you're lucky if you get a guy to work out after school, let alone have first block of the day as football. I think that is something that a lot of guys don't really talk about, is setting up players for their success in academics. They talk about it, but they don't dive into what they do in high school that has prepared them for it, right? I think that's just like there's a gap. And I don't think people really are, and parents don't understand that, right? So it goes back to the whole where you send your kid to school. If that's the way it's like, you got to prepare them and kind of start to really think ahead, do your homework on the high school. Is this a place where they can graduate early? What courses are they actually taking? They may have a 4.0, but does that 4.0 really carry the weight it needs to get to at the next level?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's just that's something we constantly have conversations on too. But you definitely have your group of schools that we are going to hit all the time.
I think your other point about the group of five being a place that you can really get some great recruits, because I've said this before. Why, like, if you're a good enough student to go to Princeton and you have a scholarship to Georgia Southern, like, why would you go to Georgia? Why would you go to Georgia Southern? I mean, and you could always listen, if you end up being that good, right? You could grad transfer. The way the world is now, you probably have 7 other years if you want to.
Well, Dave, think about it, because we've seen that
probably
trend,
got 7
right?
more years after your 4 years, so you go 11 years.
And I'm sure, Mike, because you've been in the Ivy League for the past 7 years, like you've seen that is these Power Fives. They want to take that grad transfer from an Ivy League. They understand the kid that they're getting, the type of player that they are, right? Because they've played at that high level. They know they're going to be disciplined and understand all the off the field stuff. They're not going to be an issue coming to that Power Five. A lot of the transferring that you see within the Ivy League, and you can tell me if I'm just wrong, are those graduates that have already graduated. They have that one extra year. They're at that level. Like, I'll take a guy from Princeton, you know what I mean, who's going to solidify my O-line room for that last run, right? Why wouldn't you do that?
No, you're right. That's become another recruiting enhancement for us as well. Come to the number one school in the country, be developed by us for 4 years, and then that 5th year, you can go on to a graduate transfer at a Power 4 if you're talented.
Coach Rice talked about it, right, Dave? Like, I'm almost positive that in his episode, he talked about that aspect of it, of like, I'll be the first one to help him and say, you know what? Absolutely. You've done everything you have for us or can for us, right? Like, now let me help you if this is what you want to do and where you want to go. Like, no doubt.
We lay that out for the players. So when you come into our program, we give guys the opportunity about number of games. Those are conversations that, to be honest with you, when we first started, we're kind of looking at each other like, are we really doing this now? But it's the best thing for the player. I think working for Bob and just, my mentality and our vertical alignment within our program, it's always about what's best for the player in the long run. So if we have to keep a guy out of a certain amount of games to preserve a 5th year, especially when they're younger, so that they can go on and play at the Power 4 that 5th year, we're going to do it. Jalen Travis, who's the starting right tackle for the Indianapolis Colts, did that, went on to Iowa State, was able to make a nice chunk of change. You have a Princeton diploma, which is the most important part, and now it's playing in the National Football League. You had Ozzie Nicholas, who was the highest graded linebacker by Pro Football Focus in the country. In his senior season was an All-American, went on to Duke, had a tryout with the Falcons, didn't make it, but now he's working in commercial real estate in Dallas, Texas. And
right.
Him, and you have these great stories, and he was an All-ACC player. So he's a two-time All-Ivy, two-time All-ACC, had some injuries, and now he's got a Princeton Rolodex as long as the eye can see in that part. Liam Johnson, who was his counterpart, was the Ivy League Player of the Year. Not quite NFL measurables or speed-wise, but was literally the Player of the Year. They played right next to each other. Man, was I a really smart coach in 22 and 23 with those two monsters. And he goes on and grad transfers to Cal, has a game-winning interception on Pac-12 after dark, whatever. I guess they're the ACC after dark now you can call it. But and you're so proud of those guys, and those are great stories for me to tell when we get into those recruiting battles. Come to Princeton. We are going to take care of you for 4 years. We are going to coach you as well as anybody in the country. We have Power 4 resources, and then we'll send you on in year 5, and then that can help you with your draft prep if you're at that level. So really right now we're at a point in time where we're sending a really strong amount of players year to year to FBS graduate transfer opportunities. And the most important thing is they have that Princeton experience and diploma behind them as they go on their way.
When you had a situation where you had a down year and you're had so much success for so long, what questions do you guys ask yourself as a staff, like in order to say, like what happened here? Like what are some of the questions that you ask yourself in order to like rebuild it back to where you guys were?
Yeah, that's an awesome question because we're living it right now. I think that's something you go 35-5 over a 4-year span. My first 4 years here, I didn't lose a game until November, right? So you have a lot of happy Saturdays when you coach for the Princeton Tigers, and that's the expectation, and that's the pressure here. When you look at our athletic department, we win more Ivy League championships. I think we have over 120 more Ivy League championships than the next school in the Ivy League. So the people in the hallways expect to win around here. And that's why I came here, and that's why I stay here, because of that mentality of we are going to win and do it the right way. It starts with self-reflection. I think, I'm a big studier of the Daily Stoic. There's a guy by the name of Ryan Holiday. Yep. If you don't listen to him, you should. And one of the things, he studies greatness. So I want to learn from ancient rulers to modern day people and studying coaches. You want to study greatness. And one of the things he talks about is empires, they don't crumble from outside with invaders, they crumble from within. And I think for us, it was just a matter of looking at some daily habits, looking at measurable things within the players. I think just overall, naturally, as you're recruiting, I'm sitting in someone's living room and talking about how we're 35-5 with 3 Ivy League championships. Every single guy that played for Bob Surace that graduated here had at least 1 championship. Most had 2, some had 3. And that's a staggering number when you talk about a 15-year process of that. But now you can't say that, right? You can't say that to a recruit over the last couple of years. But I think you're getting that guy that's hungry, and it's allowed us to take a look back, like, what do we need to do more of? Number one is how we gauge our players on a week-to-week basis. So we've devised a system where we rate each player on a scale of 1 to 5 for their weekly performance. And that is something that's tangible. And we have data on it. We talk to them about our expectations within the culture. And then we're going to meet with those players. So we broke the guys into teams. So it also fosters more player-driven leadership. That was something we looked at, right? You can't just hang your hat on, hey, as a coach, here's my resume. Well, that sophomore in our program, he chose us because he wanted to be developed by myself or our position coaches and coordinators. But at the end of the day, it's a daily aspect of measuring success and data and being able to say, hey, here's what the standard needs to be. And I think more clearly defining that for us, I think it's looking at the ways we practice, just looking at some different things of, hey, we're not great in these areas. How are we going to allocate those practice times? So I think the self-reflection piece is really big. But we had Anson Dorrance come speak to the department last week, and that's something that I know myself and Bob Surace have studied a little over the last year. And one of the things that Anson Dorrance is known for is measuring data at practice. And it was through Dean Smith, his relationship. And obviously you're talking about a guy that won 22 national championships in 41 years. So I'm taking notes, right? I mean, that guy won national championships 55% of the time. It sounds like a video. You couldn't do that in a video game if you were playing on the hard. And what he talked about, what I thought was bigger than anything, and this is one of our new approaches, what's the personal narrative you tell yourself every single day? And that's one of the core pillars of that piece. And that's something that we're doing as we gauge the players. Is your personal narrative matching the outcome of the performance? When you put your head on your pillow at night, did you earn the right to rest easily because you gave everything you could for the program and for your own personal development? So now we have a series of things that we're measuring and quantitating the data for the players so that we can say, hey, Dave, you're not reaching these levels, and here's why. So it forces good conversations, hard conversations. I don't trust anybody I can't have a hard conversation with. The players need to trust me to have hard conversations. But now we're really putting everything on the table, the personal narrative. It's public within the program so that your other players see that, your team leaders see that. So it really forces accountability in every single thing you do. Everybody says they want to win a championship. Everybody wants to be All-American. Everybody wants to go to the NFL. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis with your habits, and are you hitting markers and parameters? So we've devised a system now where we're able to hold players accountable and our coaches, right? What's your personal narrative as a coach? Well, the things we did defensively in 2022 when we were the number one scoring defense in the nation, or 2023 where we were top 5 in 8 different things. Well, that scheme hasn't changed a whole lot, but how we're implementing that scheme and how we're putting the players in position to do that hasn't been as successful. Last year, we played better defense as the year went on in Ivy League play. Okay, well, let's build on that. But we're also looking at the way we do our installs. How are we measuring? What were we most successful with? What were we doing too much of? And then how do we transition those details? Because if you have vague goals, you have vague results. So for me, we're clearly defining those goals and making them more tangible versus, I think, just putting words on a T-shirt. We're bringing more life to that. And it's humbling, right? It's a humbling experience. You have to be able to look in the mirror, and I'm not going to be a politician here. It's been a couple, 18 months or so of really hard conversations and having to look in the mirror. But I think we're well on our way to rebuilding that, and really excited to now generate the evidence of all the things that we're doing.
I think also it's great. You're measuring things. I think is such an important thing now. And I think what the athlete wants out of sports hasn't changed, but the way that you can hold them accountable probably has changed because they're so used to the world of like gaming and stats and numbers. And I think a big part of all of that is really changed the way you can hold them accountable because they understand that gamification of everything, like everything's even obviously the Princeton kids, right? Even the smartest, actually, sometimes those kids even more because of the way that they've been held accountable to that for such a long time within their own world. And, and some of those kids play just as much games as anybody else. So, their own lives, they've been held accountable for that. And those numbers make a big difference. It's interesting to hear you talk about it because that's overall one of the big themes that in a lot of the podcasts we have, which is, the method of like rank, record, and publish and doing that over and over again for a variety of different things. Like we first started talking with people in the speed world about it, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere in sports. It's so amazing that the tools that are out there that you have now, there's infinite amount of tools to be able to do those kind of things, which is really cool. What I'm curious because it's so, like to me, success is like I just watched the I think it was the second time I had watched it, but I'm getting old. Maybe I'm like, did I watch this already or not? But it was the thing on Bear Bryant and Nick Saban that was on. I don't know I can't remember if it was on Netflix or what it was on, but it was a great thing. It was about Alabama football. And it really talked about like their success. And one of the big things was they had so much success. Like they won, Bear Bryant won like at one time all these national championships in one decade. And then, because of that was before black players were allowed to play in the South. And then black players were starting to play across the country. And they went through this huge down period. And, he had talked about how he wanted to integrate the players for a long time. And then obviously when he was able to integrate the players, he then all of a sudden had a resurgence of his success, right? And Saban talked about it in a different way, obviously with respect that like once he was on top, everybody's shooting arrows at you, and you have to figure out what you can continue to do in the process. But both of them had like a really interesting process. Like Bear Bryant's thing was so interesting to me because of how a guy who was really pretty old already at that time, just older at that time, was able to adapt to times, and the way that his players talked about him like was amazing, including the black players. I like absolutely like adored him, and they understood that he always had their back. And I thought it was really, really interesting because of just kind of the political dynamics of the time, right? Especially Alabama being at the time was probably the most racist state in the country, as far as their governor didn't want to allow integration. So it's really interesting how coaches adapt their processes when there's a down period, and Saban did that multiple times. And Bear Bryant did it an amazing amount of times in his career, absolutely amazing amount of times, because he was at so many different places. People just remember him from Alabama, but he was Texas A&M, he was at Maryland, he was at Kentucky, he was obviously at Alabama. Did it at every one of those places, and had situations where there became complacency, or there was it was really, really interesting. But my point of it all is complacency is a difficult thing, because when and even more difficult, I would say, at a place like Princeton, because of the fact they are so driven, those kids, right? So they're not exactly complacent outwardly, okay? Meaning like they have to do the job academically. They're coming to work and doing every little things. So I think it's really interesting how you change some of the tools that are necessary to be able to measure them, because of the fact that in their minds, they're not complacent. You know what I mean? Like I would think in the players' minds, they're probably doing everything necessarily to be the best they could be. And by retooling the system allows them to push beyond what their normal way of approaching everything is. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, like because I could imagine at Ivy League that those kids do not think of themselves at all at being complacent in any way, shape, or form.
It's awesome that you bring that up, because anybody that asks me what is the biggest challenge of coaching in the Ivy League, and for me, it's 100% when our players face failure to start, because you look at them, the articles in their local high school paper are about what a scholar athlete they are. They probably were in the National Honor Society. They were a Boy Scout. Everyone in the community knows that this individual got into the #1 school in the country, was probably their best player on their football team. Everything they've done and everything they've touched has turned to gold. And when you get here in this environment, and then you compete against the other 7 great institutions that we're fortunate to compete against, they understand, or they don't understand yet, how hard it is, because the success has come. And when you work hard, all that does is provide an opportunity for an opportunity. And we try to get that into the players' heads as well, that just because you work hard doesn't mean that those 7 other Ivy League schools and then the 3 schools in the non-conference, they lift weights too. They have coaches that get paid. They study the film, and it needs to get back to that cultural belief in every single day that there's this faith that we're going to put evidence out there. And the only thing that matters is the evidence that you put out there. Like I don't work any less hours today than I did when we were 9-1 and gave up 13 points a game, right? So it's not like that has changed. I think one of the core aspects of it, again, it comes back to that honesty piece of it. Are you looking at the big picture and saying, okay, am I being honest with my output? And that's where the biggest change for us and the shift has to go back to. But it's 100% the greatest challenge of coaching in this league, because you're surrounded by high achievers. And then it's our job to make sure that the high achiever mentality is harnessed the right way. I mean, to me, leadership's not what you preach. It's what you tolerate. That's a Jocko Willing thing that I put up on the screen all the time. I think the other part is you see this, and Anson Dorrance talked about this as well, and it was a little more articulate way than I would have said it without crediting him. The society of friends. Everybody in this day and age, I think, especially when you get to Princeton, these guys start to bond earlier and earlier in the recruiting process, which is awesome, because we're going earlier on guys. guys. So they have a Snapchat group at 16 or 17 when they commit. They do OVs together. Their moms and dads know each other, even if they're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Nashville, Tennessee. They've connected the world there. Well, if we have a relationship that dates back for a while, but Derek's not doing what he needs to do to be successful, I need to call Derek out. And I think that's something that has become a little more challenging too, when you have people who individually, well, I'm doing my part, right? Mike Weick, I'm killing it. I'm doing a great job. But Derek's not doing a great job. Sorry to use you as an example there, Derek, but it's like I need to be able to stand tall and have the confidence in myself to also tell Derek that he's not up to standard. So I think that's something that is really critically important. It's really hard. We're trying to now foster the courage to be disliked at times. And when you're disliked, it's not that you're disliked as a person, you're disliked in the moment. And I had a great conversation with one of our tailbacks, and he's wired tight and he's amazing in the weight room. He's an electric speed guy. And when you look in his eyes, there's this fierce competitor in him that he's never satisfied. And he wants every guy to be on that level, which is amazing. But then it's also channeling that guy to understand, hey, if a guy watches a Netflix show, that doesn't mean he's not helping us win, right? You have to be able to, like, this kid thinks you can't watch film 90 hours a week. Some people aren't geared that way. I think it's also trying to find those best leaders, those most intense people that want the driven for success, but also how they can be relatable to their teammates while they have that same courage to be disliked. I think that's something that we're really trying to foster too. Like, as a coach, I tell them I have a lot of friends. I'd love to be your friend when you graduate and have an alumni dinner with you wherever, or come by the office. But during the 4 years you're here, my number one job is the mission above all else, to put us in position to be successful. And our coaching staff feels that way. But now it's getting the players to have that same mindset, that if you're really someone's best friend, you hold them to the highest of standards, and you meet them where they're at, and then help them rise up instead of degrading or doing those things. But also, on the same flip side of it, being a high achiever isn't just good enough by yourself. The game of football, you need other people. That's what makes this so cool, makes this so special. It's the most inclusive sport in the world. But now, how do you get those guys to make that jump? So it is challenging, because a kid who's never failed, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is still the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And then my job to train those guys, and our staff's job to go, hey, it's crappy. You're a backup for the first time. You didn't make the travel squad. I know that local newspaper in Charlotte's calling about you. You just have to face that. The reality is you're behind these other guys. What are you going to do now to rise up? So I think that's a lot of it, right? And then also, I think the other aspect of it is making sure you find joy in the process of it and trying to have some fun with the guys too. Because I do think that a lot of times we get these type A personalities. They're wired in such a way to be successful, and they've always been successful for the most part in everything they do. Well, don't lose the joy in the struggle. They're learn how to laugh at yourself. That took me a long time. I didn't learn that until my late 20s. But trying to get these guys to learn how to laugh at themselves when they do fall short, and I think in just finding little ways to show them that you care outside of just what the football production piece is too. So I think those are really important factors, and you have to keep that in mind. They're really analytical kids. They're really intelligent kids, but they're still growing adults as we go through that. And I think having fun with them is important too.
Great. Right. Because they also now see you as a non-robot, right? Like, you're not a robot, and it's not strictly about business, right? Like, it is like, we got to understand that I'm going to ask you to do some things that are really hard. They're really challenging, and I'm going to ask you to do them, and I'm going to expect you to do them at a high level and, be all in on it. So if I'm doing that, then you need to understand that, I'm also a person too, and they need to see you as that, because they're just not going to buy into a guy that, is only vested because this guy can make this tackle, or, what you can do for me on the field. They need to know that you're invested in them as a human being, and you want, the ins and the outs of what their future is and their livelihood and their lives in general. Like, I just think the student athlete today relates more to that, a guy that's, going to hold them to a high standard, but at the same time, can show them some empathy and compassion and, respect what they're doing on that level. I think the quote old school mentality where coaches were just kind of, you do it this way and that's the way it is because of, I'm telling you that, or the militant type of disciplinary kind of, extreme structure where man, coach is just always on it, right? Like they need to know that you have a little bit more invested and you care about who they are as a person. And once I think you have that connection with a player, and to me, that's your job as a coach, is to find that connection with those guys in your room and on your roster that makes them tick to a different level that maybe they wouldn't do that for somebody else because they care and they know you care. You know, I think that's the way to get through. I've always said you win with people, right? Irregardless. And that goes with your players too. And you know, you got to let them in, right? Because for a long time, there was that fine line of like, all right, I'm your coach. And that's kind of it. Right. But, you know, especially now with having kids and whatnot, like, I want those guys, you know, when they ask about, hey, how's your daughter doing? Hey, how's your wife? You know what I mean? Like even at the high school level, dude, like they get it and they want that. You know what I mean? They want to know a little bit more about coach and that, oh, he's actually a person, right? Like he just doesn't care about whether I can come in here and perform. And to me, like I've always gotten a lot more out of those guys that, you know, you kind of show that other side than you do with the guys where it's, you know, a strictly business type of approach. I don't know if that's the new era player or the new era coach, or it's a little combination of, you know, what it is, but I'll tell you, it wasn't the majority when I got into this thing 17 years ago, right? Like that just wasn't how coaches were. If you were a player's coach, right, you kind of were looked at a certain type of way, like, oh, are you just trying to be their friend? You know, those guys you can't really win and in that way, right? I mean, just look at, you know, the NFL of how coaches used to be and how coaches are now, right? And, you know, it trickles down to college and how it works, and then high school, and then, you know, Dave could attest to it, like in the youth world, right, where he is mainly now. I mean, you're just hoping to get a coach that like will show up on a consistent basis. Like the other stuff is irregardless, but if nothing else, they may know nothing about football itself, but they have to build those relationships with the players where those guys understand, like, this guy cares about me.
Yeah, I think that well, there's a balancing act to it. So there's a balancing act. There's no doubt. And I see so many guys that may too into the invested in it's not the relationship, but invested in their lives, like too deep into somebody's lives. I think it's important. Important to have that relationship. It's also important for them to know that, you know, you have expectations, and this has to be done a certain way. And just because I like you as a person doesn't mean that I'm not going to criticize your actions. And I think that's you know, in any level, that's always a thing that kids from youth to college have to learn. Like, you know, that's part of handling things and part of growing. Coach, any final like words or thoughts as far as like what you really like see the direction of what you guys are taking everything from Princeton standpoint, and the important value systems that you guys have that you know you want to articulate?
Yeah, I think gratitude is the number one aspect of it, right? When you are grateful for where you are, where you've come from, and also look at things not with rose-colored glasses, but also with a realistic approach. Being at a place like Princeton for me is something, you know, I take a lot of honor to protect every single day. Represent is something we talk about all the time, and I get to represent the longest standing college football program in the entire world. And to me, that's something that I don't take lightly. You know, the people that I get to interact with, the inspiring CEO that you meet that played here 40 years ago, who gives back with internships or hires a player, that guy is represented in every single install that I'm going to put on the field, and the product that we put on the field when they come back for homecoming, putting a product out that they can be proud of, but also having a 99% graduation rate, and the players, the development side of it, and seeing them go on and be uber successful, most of them in something other than football, is really the greatest privilege and honor of my life. And that's a reason why I think kind of full circle from the beginning of our conversation today, you know, being able to be at a place where I can change someone's life. Really, you can change their grandkid's life because of the Princeton power of the alumni network, the people, the power of the education, the preparation. It's something that there's a lot of pressure in that. And to me, that's an incredible privilege to be a part of those things. And it's an honor to be able to be on here with you guys and to be able to, however many people end up watching this. I know, Dave, it's like, I didn't go to Princeton, so I can't count as high as the amount of followers that you guys have. But at the end of the day, being able to my journey and our place and how special it is, and hopefully how authentic my passion for the place is comes through. It's an amazing thing. And I think for any of the younger coaches that are on here listening, I got a chance to speak at the Big New England Football Clinic up in Newport this weekend. And it
Great
was
clinic.
Yeah, I went up there when I moved to Newport, I made $15,000. I left there as a defensive coordinator. It was full time, and now I go back as a full-time Ivy League coach. There's a lot of just gratitude for people and building genuine relationships. It's not about the social media branding. It's not about how many likes I can get. It's about being proud of the person you are and being proud of the kind of the pillars of what has made you successful. And for me, it's waking up every day, and when I get to wear the orange and black, it's really the greatest privilege of my life. And I appreciate you guys having me on here and having a chance to talk about it. This is a great podcast. And when Derek reached out and I got a chance to talk to a couple of my other friends that I really value, their opinions, their expertise, I go to those guys for X's and O's or situational football questions, but I also know those guys' wives. I know their children, and they're people that I break bread with. That's what makes this the greatest game in the world. And, really just enjoyed having an opportunity to spend 90 minutes with you guys talking about the greatest game in the world and getting to know you guys a bit as well.
Absolutely. No, it's great. It's great having you on, and, you're doing great things. We're excited to continue to have guys from Princeton on, and, much continued success. I love what you guys do. I love what the program stands for, and we'll hopefully see you down the road.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. Well, let's get you at Power Stadium. You guys need tickets. We got you. And we talked about juice. Hopefully I brought it today, and we'll get you out there to see us firsthand.
Thanks,
That's
Coach.
awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you, man.
Mike. I
Yeah,
appreciate it,
you,
man.
buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
We'll
Appreciate
talk
your
soon.
time.
Thank you.
All right. Great episode. Great stuff. Great guest.
Yeah, I heard him speak last year when I went to Rowan's clinic, and just infectious, right? Like his passion for the game. And that was before he, you know what I mean? Like that came out in the first 3 minutes of a talk about, linebacker play, you know what I mean? And he sold me in the first 3 minutes just based off of, kind of how he, it just comes through, right? And like we talk about that all the time. Like, in order to coach at these high levels and get the most out of your players, like you have to be a certain type of way. There's a couple ways to do it, but guys like that, where the passion for the game itself, like just kind of seeps through their pores and you just feel it right away, that juice that they bring when they walk in the room, right? I love talking to those kind of guys because, I like to think I'm that way, I hope most guys approach it that way and they love what they're doing and like he does, you know what I'm saying? And also just the Ivy League is always so interesting and intriguing with it because, it's just the highest standard of everything in terms of whether it's academics or whether it's, the level of sport, irregardless of what sport it is. So when we can get those guys on and talk to those guys about it, I mean, it's always just so awesome, to see kind of like what goes into like the Ivy League aspect of it. And how it's just different. You know what I mean? Like he talked about it's still being the true, purest form of college football. Like, and I agree, you know what I mean? Cause the NIL stuff and all the money stuff, like it's just different in the Ivy League of how they go about it and whatnot.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. There is a huge difference between the way that they go about it and the way a lot of other people go about it within their program. It's just a different beast in general. It really, really is just a different beast. And it's
and he's
awesome.
been there for 7 years. So you know what I mean? Like he's seen
right.
the waves and flows. I mean, hell, you've been to Princeton games. You know what I'm saying? Like for the longest time, Princeton was the example of here's what it is to be, the champion of the Ivy League. Right. And for a while, they didn't even partake in the, FCS playoffs. So you literally like your goal every year was to win the league because that's really all you had. You know what I'm saying? Like since then, now they're part of the FCS playoffs and whatnot. And they can go win an FCS national championship. But it's just always intriguing. That intrigued me a lot. Like, that added a little bit more of an appeal to kind of look at those programs in general because, they offer up like, hey, you come here, you win an Ivy League championship, and that is your national championship, because there wasn't another, level to play. So for guys to still want to go there and them to have that success at that level, like, unbelievable. And you've mentioned 1,000 times over and over, like the setting itself to go to a Princeton football game. Like, like you've talked about just how it's awesome.
There's no doubt. It absolutely is. I mean, it's one of these things where like you get like a just an incredible vibe when you come in there,
Right.
It really is. It's just
I love
incredible.
that he talked about the stigma.
What's that?
The stigma of what it is to be like a Princeton or be a part of Princeton, like smoking room, like, you know what I mean? Like that whole like vision of like when people hear Princeton, this is what they think of, and how he kind of like, I don't want to say he debunked it, but he said like, that's not, I mean, it is here, but it's not the end all be all of what actually is Princeton. It's just the highest of the high achievers that hold themselves accountable and to the highest level across every discipline in the world, whether it's business or whether it's, you know what I mean? Like they just hold themselves to a higher standard of how they carry it. And it's everyone, right? Whereas some places you go, maybe it's only a couple or there's a pocket of it. It's not across the board, but at Princeton, I mean, you're the -- university in the country.
Right. There's no doubt. It makes all the difference. So, what great podcast. Really enjoyed.
Yeah, I like Mike. He's really good, man. Tomorrow we have Dan Lundy.
Yeah, Dan Lundy. Yep. He's great too as well. So it's
yeah, he was all juiced up, man. He's like, oh yeah, Dave, like this is gonna be great.
No, it'll be good. Dan Lundy's a great guy. So yeah, it's really cool.
Atlanta? Is he Atlanta?
What's that?
Where's he based out of? Atlanta?
Yeah. Yep. I think maybe
yep.
He's
Fourth down U.
Right. Fourth down U.
Works with the tour, you know what I mean? Like evaluating training measures and all kinds of. He's been a speaker at the AFCA. You know what I mean? He's got a podcast, Kick It Forward. Did he play at the U? Yeah, he played for the U.
Sure. I'm not sure.
It says on his. I'll have to ask him about that because it says on his bio that he's an alum. He's a Miami U alum.
May have. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. Really good stuff. All right, so I look forward to Dan Lundy tomorrow. We'll get that rolling and we'll go from there. Great pod. I got to get all this stuff for 7-on-7 all worked out here and get us wrapped up for this weekend.
Yep. Let me know so I can call our referee buddy because my phone's been ringing.
Well, that's the same. That's the his should not his shouldn't change. But I'll give you the exact things tomorrow. So
that's you know him. That's what he's looking for. He wants to know what field numbers we're on, what game, how many games for this field, and how many games for that field. But I talked to Coach Blum. We're good with his guys. He'll be there, ready to rock, which is always awesome. I mean, man, how many years have we used him now? 4 or 5 years? This might be year 4. I think this might be year 4 that we've used his staff and his guys to kind of help us out in Delaware, which is amazing because shit. He's still winning games and producing Division I athletes in freaking Delaware.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Looking like he's ready to go fishing.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, how many championships do you have, buddy? How many guys do you have playing Power 5 ball? I love it. How many times are you going to beat RBC? Sorry, Coach Lang, that's not a shot. It's just, I mean, you saw that game last year. His boys looked a little different than RBC looked physically. No
doubt about it. It's good stuff, man. It's really good stuff. And we're getting these guys on and talking to them in different capacities, special teams guys like that, like Dan, and talking to coach from Princeton. It's great. It's great. So I'm wondering I have to see if the website updates that automatically.
In terms of like guys that have been on going right there.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, too. Like Friday, too, we have Ryan Jurgel, who's the special teams coordinator at LIU, heard him speak 2 weeks ago. He did like a little clinic, like, because we do our Wednesday night special teams clinic that Coach Gallagher, rest in peace, put together. He spoke on punt, man. I mean, it was awesome. The X's and O's and the stuff that he was talking about, and I'm really excited to talk to him on Friday, just for not only what they're doing at LIU, you know what I mean? Like, in just, what are they, like 2 or 3 years old in terms of being an FCS program after they, kind of changed over from CW Post.
Right.
But also, like, schematically, just some of the nuances that he's done within it, very far removed from your traditional, like, here's how we punt the ball, you know what I mean, type of stuff. It was really cool. So we'll finish this week off strong, and then next week we got some good stuff too. Obviously, I mean, we're booked out, buddy.
That's good stuff right there. That's good stuff right there. So, well, I'm looking forward to it, man.
All right, buddy.
All right, man. I'll talk to you a little bit later.
See ya.
All right, bye.